Ever wondered how influence really works? I mean, really? Forget about long, drawn-out arguments or trying to convince someone with a mountain of facts. Today, we're going to dive into a method that works on a much, much faster timeline. It's about capturing attention and establishing influence before the conscious mind even has a chance to put its defenses up.
So, let's start with a big question. Where do you think influence actually begins? I mean, most of us would probably say it's when we open our mouths, right? When we start making our case. But what if that's totally backward?
Well, it turns out influence begins way before a single word is even spoken. It actually starts in the nervous system, not in the logical part of the brain. There's this tiny initial window where the other person is basically unguarded. They're just running on pure instinct and pattern recognition. And that is where the real work gets done.
So how long is this critical window?
Just 90 seconds.
Yeah, that's it. In that minute and a half, the entire foundation for influence is either built or it completely crumbles. Okay, so how in the world do you navigate this tiny window? You use a map. It's called the 90-second control map, and it's a framework that lines up our behavior with the brain's natural processing sequence. So instead of fighting against someone's instincts, you learn to work with them.
This map has 4 very distinct intervals. The first 10 seconds are for the authority imprint. Then, from 10 to 30 seconds, you create what's called a novelty break. That leads into identity softening, which happens between 30 and 60 seconds, and you finish it all off by elevating the interaction in the final 30 seconds. Each step is absolutely crucial, and you have to do them in order.
All right, let's break down those first 10 seconds. The authority imprint. This is, hands down, the most important part. In this tiny slice of time, the other person's brain is making a super fast snap judgment. It's sorting you into a simple box. Are you a leader or a follower? A friend or a threat? Are you someone who matters or someone it can just ignore? And here's the thing, this categorization is based almost entirely on nonverbal cues. Needy behaviors, fidgeting, smiling too fast, rushing to speak, all of that signals to the other person's brain, hey, this person needs something from me, which immediately kills your status. Authoritative behavior is the exact opposite. It's controlled stillness, a relaxed posture, unhurried movements. It sends a completely different signal that your internal world is solid and you actually have value to offer.
Okay, so let's say you've nailed the authority imprint. Awesome. But now, from 10 to 30 seconds, the brain starts looking for patterns to confirm its initial judgment. This is where most people completely lose it. They fall into the usual social script, and the other person's brain just goes, predictable, and it disengages. The window slams shut. To stop that from happening, you need a novelty break.
Now, what's really cool is how simple this can be. Novelty doesn't mean you have to be weird or do something crazy. It can be a slight pause where one isn't expected, a subtle shift in your tone of voice, anything that just breaks their pattern recognition. That little disruption triggers something called an orienting response in the brain, which forces it to stay locked onto you. So, because you've established authority and you've created novelty, the person is now in this really interesting state of focused attention mixed with a little bit of uncertainty. And that combination does something fascinating. It makes their sense of self, their very identity, a lot more flexible. That internal script they have, the one that's always saying, I'm the kind of person who, it starts to get a lot quieter. And this quote just brilliantly nails the result. Their defensive walls haven't been knocked down with some brilliant argument. They've just become totally irrelevant. At this point, they're far more receptive to your ideas because their grip on who they think they are in that moment has loosened up. And that brings us to the final interval, from 60 to 90 seconds. You have authority, you have their attention, and you have a receptive audience. Now you elevate the interaction. You shift from just being interesting to making the interaction actually important. And you do this by saying something real, a sharp observation, maybe even an uncomfortable truth that raises the stakes and makes them lean in. So you've successfully used the 90-second map. The door is wide open. Now what do you actually say? This is where we move from body language into linguistics. And the goal here isn't persuasion. It's something way more powerful called installation. The difference here is like night and day. See, persuasion is basically a negotiation. You present your case, and their brain automatically starts looking for reasons to push back. Installation, on the other hand, completely bypasses that critical filter. Your idea gets absorbed directly into their thought process, almost as if it was their idea to begin with. So how does installation even work? Well, it's all about this one principle. You're not just declaring facts at someone. You're carefully crafting sentences that resonate with the thoughts and feelings that are already running around inside their head. Your language either syncs up with their internal world or it just bounces right off.
The target isn't their logical, analytical mind. You're aiming for the narrator. You know, that inner voice that's constantly telling them a story about who they are and what everything means. When your words sync up with that narrator's story, they don't get evaluated, they just get accepted.
Now, to speak to this narrator, there are 5 really powerful linguistic tools you can use. You've got embedded commands, which hide instructions in plain sight. Negative dissociation, which frames ideas by saying what they're not. Scarcity whispers, which imply your time or insight is limited. Identity installation, which links your idea to their sense of who they are. And emotional ignition triggers, which use specific words to spark a feeling. They're all designed to be almost invisible.
Let's just look at one quick example, an embedded command. On the surface, you're just making a casual observation about some people, but the unconscious mind hears the instruction hidden right inside. Notice how fast everything can make sense. And because it's not aimed directly at them, it just slips past their resistance and gets processed like it was their own thought.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, from nonverbal cues all the way to some pretty advanced linguistics. So let's pull all of this together into a clear toolkit you can actually use.
First, always remember the 90-second map. You've got 10 seconds to imprint authority with stillness. Then 20 seconds to create a novelty break to hold their attention. Then 30 seconds for identity softening, which makes them receptive. And finally, 30 seconds to elevate the whole interaction with a real insight. And if you remember only one thing from all of this, let it be this. The sequence is non-negotiable. You can't skip a step. Each interval creates the perfect psychological conditions for the next one to work. The authority imprint lets the novelty land. The novelty creates the focus needed for identity softening. It's like an architecture that you have to build step by step. Look, this isn't just some abstract theory. It's a practical map for human interaction. The principles we've been talking about are in play in every single conversation you have, whether you notice them or not. So the real question is, now that you know the map exists, how are you going to use your next 90 seconds?